The R&D progress of the J-35 fighter jet has exceeded expectations and is earlier than previously estimated by the West. It is expected that when the Fujian aircraft carrier enters service in 2025, the J-35 fighter jet will be on the deck. There is no doubt that the J-35 fighter jet has extremely excellent stealth capabilities, in sharp contrast to the Su-57 fighter jet, whose huge fan blades of the engine can be clearly seen from the front, and the F-35 fighter jet with a bumpy surface. Currently, the only fighter jets that can be regarded as having perfect stealth are the American F-20 and Chinese J-20 and J-35 fighter jets. With the development of China's stealth technology, the annual Red Flag military exercises in the United States have begun to abandon the drama of the F-20 and F-35 fighter jets brutally slaughtering the F-15 and F-16 fighter jets by a large margin, and have changed to dogfights between stealth fighter jets. The speed of this change has caught the participating allies off guard. In battles between stealth fighter jets, it has returned to the era when third-generation fighter jets competed in terms of turning, performance and power. Can the J-35 fighter jet keep up in terms of power? During the Cold War, the main mission of the U.S. Navy was decisive battles in the ocean. After the Cold War, since there was no clear and realistic threat, the F-14 carrier-based fighter jet with strong air control capabilities was hastily retired, and the F-18F fighter jet was used mainly for ground attack missions and also for fleet air defense on a part-time basis. The F-35C fighter jet has no difference in positioning from the F-18EF fighter jet. However, as a carrier-based stealth fighter jet, the F-35C fighter jet has obvious technological advantages over all fourth-generation plus fighter jets. The United States was once fully confident that Chinese stealth fighter jets would not enter service until at least 2030, and the F-35C fighter jet would not be challenged until around 2040 at the earliest. This is also the main reason why the U.S. Navy chose the F-35C fighter jet, which has very limited flight speed, supersonic flight performance, and high-speed interception capabilities. As the next-generation carrier-based fighter jet, the U.S. Navy will purchase a total of 360 F-35C fighter jets, with 2025 on each aircraft carrier, used in combination with 40 F-18EF fighter jets. The F-18EF fighter jets focus on fleet air defense and also take into account ground attack missions, while the F-35C focuses on ground attack missions and also undertakes offensive air control tasks when the situation is favorable. The F-35C fighter is the largest among the F-35 fighters, with a wing area of 57.6 square meters, approximately 30% larger than that of the F-35A. Its empty weight is 15.6 tons, and the maximum takeoff weight is 31.8 tons, exceeding that of the F-14 Tomcat fighter. Due to the need to balance the requirements of the three services, the F-35's fuselage is rather bulky, and its overload capacity is only 75 g. The F-135 PW400 engine it uses is far ahead in terms of technology and performance. However, to meet the requirements of high thrust and low fuel consumption, its bypass ratio is only 0.6, and the thrust-to-weight ratio is only 0.75, resulting in a maximum flight speed of less than Mach 1.6. As a carrier-based aircraft, it is a failure. Lockheed Martin lacks experience in developing carrier-based aircraft, and a series of low-level problems were encountered during the development of the F-35C. For example, design flaws in the nose landing gear caused the pilot's head to hit the canopy during catapult take-off, and the distance between the main landing gear and the tail hook is too short. When the wheels roll over the arresting wire, the tail hook cannot catch the arresting wire that has not yet returned to position, and the mechanism damping of the tail hook is insufficient and it is easily bounced by the uneven surface of the deck. These problems have only been temporarily alleviated after adjustments. The J-15 fighter developed by the Chinese Navy is similar to the F-A-18E fighter in terms of thrust-to-weight ratio, load, range, and loiter time, and its maximum takeoff weight and flight speed are even a little higher. The comprehensive performance of the J-15T catapult-equipped fighter is even better. However, the J-15 fighter in the first and second island chains is facing a large number of F-35 fighters. The U.S. military is expected to equip 2,443 of them. Japan, South Korea, and Australia not only have a large-scale equipment of F-35 fighters, but their amphibious assault ships are also actively being modified to be equipped with F-35B fighters. Although the F-35C, F-35A, and F-35B are all plagued by various problems. In the face of the revolutionary stealth design and network warfare capabilities of the F-35 fighter, other problems are minor. It is undoubtedly very difficult for non-stealth fighters to fight against stealth fighters. There is almost no possibility of detecting and attacking the enemy first, and it is very difficult to avoid being ambushed. In the Red Flag military exercise in 2017, the F-35 fighter achieved an exchange ratio of 15:1 against non-stealth fighters. If the J-15 fighter cannot effectively respond, the defense capability of the entire aircraft carrier fleet will be greatly weakened. Previously, the technological level of China's weapon research and development was not high. The military had to be equipped with what the manufacturers produced, and what the manufacturers could produce also depended on what the supporting factories could produce. Now, under the background of military-civilian integrated development, China has the ability to produce what the military requires. When developing the next-generation carrier-based aircraft, there have been countless debates about what kind of carrier-based aircraft China's aircraft carriers need. Stealth is the most basic requirement, but not the only one. China's maritime geography is actually very awkward. It is backed by the continent and faces the ocean on two sides. But there are no effective strategic outlets. It is blocked by the first island chain and the Malay Peninsula and is in the C-shaped encirclement of the United States. If it wants to get out, it can only fight its way out. Large tonnage heavy aircraft carriers have become the top priority in the development of the Chinese Navy, especially in the direction of the Western Pacific. There is a lack of effective land-based aviation support and no suitable airports. Aircraft carriers must fight on their own, so the combat radius and loiter time of carrier-based aircraft are very important. Therefore, the first requirement for carrier-based aircraft is to have a long enough range. A long range can expand the fleet air defense circle in air superiority missions and also enable ground and sea-based attacks outside the enemy's fire range. A relatively long loiter time also increases the equivalent number of fighters, which is especially important for aircraft carriers with a limited number of carrier-based aircraft. Although the J-15 fighter has a long enough range, the problem of the generation gap with carrier-based stealth fighters cannot be neglected. Otherwise, the hard-won narrow gap will widen again. Moreover, China's carrier-based fighters not only have to counter the F-35 fighters, but also be able to withstand the shore-based F-22 fighters. If carrier-based fighters cannot form a reliable fleet air defense umbrella, the consequence of the aircraft carrier being sunk will be disastrous. During the research, manufacturing, and use of the J-20, China's aviation industry has established a complete technical system and supply chain. Theoretically, the J-20 can be modified into a carrier-based stealth fighter. However, the J-20 was developed based on the requirements of the Air Force, and the requirements for takeoff and recovery operations on the ship were not considered. So there are huge challenges for it to be used on a ship while China was developing the J-20 fighter. Shenyang Aircraft Corporation also developed the FC-31 stealth fighter. In 1988, The American YF-20-23 fighters emerged, and China also started the High Maneuverability Stealth Fighter program. In 2002, the Air Force began to evaluate the standards for a new generation fighter. After 2 years of evaluation, the Chengdu Aircraft Corporation's proposal won and became the J-20 fighter. Shenyang Aircraft Corporation was unwilling to see its previous research efforts go to waste and decided to reduce the size to a medium-sized aircraft to compete for the export market. Its design has changed several times, gradually evolving from version 1.0 to version 2.0 and 3.0. The FC-31 fighter is smaller than the J-20 fighter. The space it occupies in the hangar and on the deck is only 55%-60% of that of the J-20, improving the aircraft carrying capacity of the aircraft carrier and the working conditions in the hangar. However, whether for export or for use on a ship, reliable power is required. At that time, China's fighter engines were only the L-31F or WS-10, which were too heavy to be installed on the FC-31 stealth fighter. If the downgraded version of the WS-15 was chosen, the avionics, weapons, and combat radius would inevitably be greatly reduced, while the price would not be much lower therefore. The FC-31 stealth fighter requires a medium thrust engine. At that time, China had no available ones in stock, and only the RD-33 engine produced by Klimov Company was an option. The RD-33 engine is the power plant of the Russian MiG-29 fighter. It is a two-shaft turbojet engine, 4.26 meters long, 1 meter in diameter, with an air inlet diameter of 0.75 meters, weighing 1,050 kilograms, with a thrust-to-weight ratio of 0.1 to 6. A service life of 1,400 hours or 2,000 hours. An overhaul time of 700 hours and 1,400 hours. A compression ratio of 21.5. A maximum airflow rate of 76.9 kilograms per second. A thrust of 8.3 tons in full afterburner state. A fuel consumption rate of 2.05 kilograms per hour. And 0.77 kilograms per hour in the full afterburner state. This is not a fuel-efficient engine. The empty weight of the MiG-29 fighter is equivalent to that of the F-18 fighter. One engine cannot provide sufficient thrust, so only two medium thrust engines can be used. The RD-33 engine has backward performance and poor fuel economy. In addition, with pitifully little fuel reserve, the MiG-29 fighter has a very short range. However, the Soviet Army usually deployed it at simple forward airfields with ground troops pushing forward, so the short range was not a big problem. But for a carrier-based fighter, it is a major issue when carrier-based fighters perform combat patrol missions. They are required to be able to patrol to 140 kilometers away from the aircraft carrier for 2 hours with fuel, and also maintain fuel for 2-minute dogfight air combat. In addition, sometimes there are situations where 20-30 aircraft are queuing up to land on the aircraft carrier, requiring them to maintain fuel for 20 minutes and the fuel needed for a go-around in case of a failed landing. This is relatively easy for heavy-duty carrier-based aircraft, but it is fatal for the MiG-29 fighter. In 2016, the Russian Navy's Admiral Kuznetsov V aircraft carrier set out for Syria. 3 MiG-29K carrier-based fighters were preparing to land. The first one landed successfully, but the second one snapped an arresting wire, and the broken wire entangled another arresting wire. Arresting wire, resulting in the need to spend time dealing with the broken arresting wire. The third MiG-29K carrier-based fighter had to circle in the air until it ran out of fuel and crashed. Also, the RD-33 engine was first used in the JF-17 fighter because it posed a great threat to the MiG-29 fighter. The Russian side often restricted its supply, causing the JF-17 project to be frequently defeated in bids. Moreover, it often trailed thick black smoke, affecting the external perception of the JF-17 fighter to avoid being controlled by Russia. Kizu Liaoning Aero Engine Corporation began to imitate the RD-33 engine based on the technical assistance and data provided by Russia, as well as its existing technical reserves and the pre-research results of medium thrust engines. That is, the WS-13 engine. The WS-13 engine is 4.14 meters long, 1.02 meters in diameter, weighs 1,135 kilograms, has a thrust-to-weight ratio of 7.8, a cruise thrust of 51 kN, a fuel consumption rate of 0.65 kg/knh, an afterburner thrust of 86.37 kN, a fuel consumption rate of 2.02 kg/knh, an air intake of 80 kgs, a bypass ratio of 0.57, an overhaul interval of 810 hours, and a total life of 2,200 hours. Most of its components are interchangeable with the RD-93 engine. However, for the FC-31 stealth fighter to take off and land on an aircraft carrier, its fuselage needs to be strengthened, the landing gear strengthened, and a tail hook added. It will be about 650 kilograms heavier than the land-based version, and the folding wings will add nearly 400 kilograms in weight, with a total weight increase of more than 1 ton. After the weight increase, the WS-13 engine with a maximum thrust of only 8.81 tons can no longer meet the requirements for an air superiority fighter to have an overwhelming advantage over the F-35 fighter. A relatively high thrust-to-weight ratio and low wing loading are required. The typical air combat weight is for medium-range air-to-air missiles weighing 900 kilograms each. The fuel factor should be at least 0.3, and the fuel that can be carried is 6,180 kilograms. The normal takeoff weight is approximately 20,600 kilograms. The available thrust of the engine needs to be increased by 20%. For the WS-13 engine, to increase the thrust by 20%, it needs to reach 12 tons, which requires a great deal of technological breakthrough. Otherwise, only the WS-10 with a thrust of 12.5 tons is available. However, 2 WS-10 engines are too large, and 1 WS-10 engine is not safe, considering the price of carrier-based aircraft and the lives of pilots, and the need to face bird strikes, engine failures, and combat damage at sea. Twin-engine carrier-based aircraft have an absolute advantage. Unless it is absolutely necessary, carrier-based aircraft will not use a single-engine design. The U.S. Navy has always had some psychological pressure regarding the single-engine design of the F-35C currently. The J-35 fighter uses an improved version of the WS-13 engine, the WS-13E. The thrust has been increased to 8.8 tons, and the thrust-to-weight ratio has reached 9. The takeoff thrust-to-weight ratio is 0.92, and the thrust-to-weight ratio at half fuel is 1.085. Both slightly better than those of the F-35 fighter. The Mach rings it generates are also quite beautiful. If the thrust-to-weight ratio can reach 10, the takeoff thrust-to-weight ratio and the half-fuel thrust-to-weight ratio will increase to 1.1 and 1.29 respectively, which are more than 0.2 higher than those of the F-35 fighter. Moreover, the J-35 fighter has a more streamlined and smoother aerodynamic shape than the F-35 fighter. A large number of composite materials are used to control the overall weight of the aircraft. The fuselage is slender, and the supersonic wave drag is low, driven by the WS-13E. It has achieved high maneuverability. It is believed that the mass-produced J-35 fighter will use the WS-19 engine, with a maximum thrust of more than 11 tons and with two-dimensional vectoring nozzles that deflect up and down like those of the F-22 fighter. greatly reducing the rear-facing radar cross-section and infrared signature of the aircraft. Coupled with more advanced airborne radars, its maneuverability, stealth, and situational awareness capabilities are far superior to those of the F-35 fighter. With the successive commissioning of large deck aircraft carriers of the Chinese Navy and the J-35 fighter, the strategic assumptions of the U.S. Navy have been completely disrupted. For the first time, the U.S. Navy will face an opponent with equivalent equipment. The F-35C fighter, which was originally thought to dominate the sea and air for 20 years, will have to confront the superior J-35 fighter. The J-35 fighter is an air superiority fighter, while the F-35C fighter is only an attack fighter. If a large-scale aircraft carrier decisive battle occurs between the two sides, the F-35C fighter has no advantage in terms of maneuverability, supersonic capability, and interception capability, and will largely be suppressed by the J-35 fighter. Even if the Chinese Navy is still at a disadvantage in terms of the number of aircraft carriers, if all the F-35C fighters on the U.S. Navy's aircraft carriers are shot down, then it won't matter how many more aircraft carriers the U.S. Navy has.